Hello, folks. Thank you for tuning into the Federalist Files. On today's show, the Chinese government knew about COVID a month before reporting its strife within the Democratic Party over minimum wage, the Governor Cuomo scandal, and finally, a federal judge orders Facebook to pay out $650 million in a class action lawsuit.
I think he was getting on a plane. He told me he came in to see me last event. And Representatives Shirley Jackson Lee, Al Green, Sylvia Garcia, Lizzie Pinelli, Pinell, and what am I doing here? I'm going to lose track here. And Mary.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. And that is a way to start off the show. Idiot of the Day segment with Joe Biden. It is a rough go for him nowadays. As I said before, it has now been recorded, I believe, 43 days or something like 45 days into the administration. And there has yet to be a legitimate address to the nation, which has already been done by this time within the past two administrations, whether it was Trump or it was Barack Obama. They did address America or the country. So I have a jam-packed show for you all today. Just first to start up, I have Texas opening back up, which I didn't know this. Texas and apparently Mississippi, I think, declared it today as well. They're now opened up. They're ready to go. No mask mandate, 100%. There is no restrictions on dining, indoor dining, which, to be honest, is pretty pathetic that was actually going on in Texas to begin with. I thought Texas was supposed to be the bastion of freedom in our union. It seems like, I guess they aren't anymore. And Mississippi, same thing. I didn't know that all these red states actually had restrictions on them. It's pretty pathetic. It's pretty pathetic that Florida was the only state that really did not waver, and they continued to run at full pace, full speed. I think it was both Florida as well as South Dakota were the two. Thus, the reasoning for the new allegiance to Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem, the two governors of those separate states. Today, they asked Biden, "What do you think about Texas opening back up?" And check his response out. Play 3.
I think it's a big mistake. Look, I hope everybody's realized by now, these masks make a difference. We are on the cusp of being able to fundamentally change the nature of this disease because of the way in which we're able to get vaccines in people's arms. We've been able to move that all the way up to the end of May to have enough for every adult American to get a shot. And the last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime, everything's fine, take off your mask, forget it. It still matters.
So that's a little news today. You got Joe Biden. He's calling everyone that lives in Texas Neanderthals. He's calling their governance Neanderthals as well. And here's my question is the questioning. I always question authority my entire life, as I'm sure many of you do as well. My question is, if the masks work so well, then what is the point of the lockdown? If the masks were such an effective item, then why is it that we had to lock down as well? Couldn't we have all just worn our masks on a consensus basis and walk around and have no issues? The real answer to that question is because masks don't work. They're not 100% efficacious. They may have a certain percentage. I've looked through multiple studies. There hasn't been a legitimately strong study, with the exception of the Danish study that has come out saying whether or not aerosols from COVID-19 go through the mask. There has not been a study yet to prove that. In terms of N95 masks, are the only masks that have shown any type of yield of effectiveness. And those are masks that no one's wearing when I go out to shop or whenever I leave my house. In New Jersey, we pretty much have a mask mandate in every single private business. If you are eating in a restaurant, you have to wear the mask to walk to your table, and then you take the mask off while you're sitting with a bunch of people conversating. They're just nonsensical rules, and They're nonsensical rules and executive orders that have to be followed right now in New Jersey. And that's really what the point of this is Biden just wants to continue to suppress and oppress the people. That's the point of this whole thing. It's all about control, shutting down the economy to begin with, and now holding money from the government hostage is all about control as well. And it seems like from what I'm reading today is they are going to be they're going through reconciliation with the relief bill. They're trying to cut down on how many people are going to be getting paychecks. In terms, it's dependent on how much you make a year. I'm not exactly sure with the numbers. It's something like 75,000, I think it was before. They were trying to extend it to 100,000 a year. Those people would be getting it, and I think they're going back to 75,000. So I'm not really sure about any of that. I mean, it's difficult to report on that because there's every single day it's just changing consistently. From what I see online is AOC is not happy about everything that's going on. I'm going to cover that a little bit. But first I want to start off with this huge story that's not really getting any clout in the news. China's top leaders gave secret orders in early stages of virus outbreak, documents state. And these are documents directly from the Chinese government, and they are going to be, the link is going to be in the description below. As always, I'll have it all under show notes. It is going to be an Epoch Times piece written by Frank Yu, and in the specific article, there will be pictures and visuals of these documents coming from the Chinese government. So it starts off the piece, and I quote, "The Chinese regime was aware of the severity of COVID-19 during the early stages of the Wuhan outbreak, but did not alert the public, according to a series of government documents recently obtained by the Epoch Times from a trusted source. Chinese authorities didn't publicly announce human-to-human transmission of the CCP virus until January 2020. That's funny. They characterize it as the Chinese Communist Party virus. The leaked documents indicate that the top leadership secretly ordered the National Health Commission and regional governments to deal with the outbreak while keeping the public in the dark about the health crisis. In other words, Chinese authorities covered up the outbreak at the early stage instead of alerting the people in a timely manner." So they're going to give you a little bit of a timeline in this piece of when the Chinese government actually knew or had an idea that there was something going around that wasn't normal and was unnatural. See, the Epoch Times obtained a document from the Health Commission of Guangxi Province dated on January 15th, 2020, which summarized a speech given by the Vice Director of the Commission, Wang Yang. Wang's speech indicated that the National Health Commission held a nationwide teleconference on epidemic prevention and control on January 14th, during which Mei Jingwei, the head of the commission, conveyed direct orders from Chinese leader Jinping, and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. It's very difficult to pronounce these names. And so by January 14th, they're having this nationwide teleconference about epidemic prevention. And nationwide meaning all throughout China. So we're going to see what this is all about. So although the document didn't fully detail the orders from Jinping, the high-level meeting shows that Chinese authorities were fully aware of the severity of the outbreak. Ma said that, and I don't know who Ma is, I think Ma is the one person that was giving, during which Ma, the head of the commission, it's difficult to follow with all the names, the head of the commission said that, and I quote, "It is the most serious public health emergency crisis since the SARS epidemic of 2003, according to the document. Wang advised authorities in Guangxi to be, and I quote, to be more politically aware of the extreme severity and urgency of the virus outbreak, as he conveyed the directives from Xi and Li, and Jinping, the president." So they're aware at this point now, January 14th, that there's some sort of unusual or irregular virus that's going around, worse than the, as serious as, or the most serious since SARS in 2003. Now, you think, okay, so January 14th, that's not that bad, because then I think they informed us, I believe the date is January 20th. That's actually not the truth. They knew even before that. The document, this is directly from the piece, the document also mentioned that Guangxi's Health Commission held two meetings on December 31st, 2019 and January 7th, 2020 to discuss epidemic control plans. So they knew about this in December because they were already holding, December 31st, they were already holding a meeting. So U.S.-based China affairs commentator Li Lin Li pointed out that the two dates are significant because they provide evidence of the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up of the outbreak. The dates indicate that authorities in Guangxi had already received internal orders from the top leadership, the Chinese Communist Party's Central Committee on Epidemic Control and Prevention Measures. Meanwhile, the public was unaware of the imminent health crisis. Chinese authorities failed to warn the public right away, and instead they made a public announcement on the human-to-human transmission of the Chinese Communist Party virus on January 20th, 2020. So they let everybody know January 20th, 2020 about this coronavirus. This thing's out there, it's going, whatever. It's viral, I guess you would say. So on February 15th, 2020, the Chinese Communist Party's theoretical journal Seeking Truth published a speech that Jinping, as in their president, gave on epidemic control and prevention on January 7th, 2020. Hong Kong-based Chinese-language newspaper Ming Pao published an article on February 17th, 2020 that reported that the Chinese Communist Party leaders during the January 7th, 2020 meeting required local governments to enforce relevant measures to ensure that the Chinese New Year holiday wouldn't be disrupted, citing a source in Beijing. So they knew January 7th they were already putting forward standards and enforcing measures to try to mitigate the virus at this time. It goes on. The publication obtained another document dated January 15th, 2020, issued by the National Health Commission to all provinces in China. It stated that beginning in December 2019, cases of pneumonia of unknown causes had been reported in some hospitals in Hubei province, and the result from pathogen analysis indicated that it was a novel coronavirus. The top secret document was designated as most urgent, and recipients were instructed not to circulate its contents on the internet. So that document is directly in the piece that they're citing. So in December, they're having issues with pneumonia, which means, and it takes a while for pneumonia to develop. It doesn't just instantly develop. Maybe it takes a week or two. This could have been going on, and there were other studies that I've sourced before myself, and they were retroactive. What they did was they took blood that was taken in December, and they were able to find coronavirus in that blood. So this was going on probably, if I had to guess, the very latest this was going on, we can confirm, in December, and probably the beginning of December. And the Chinese Communist Party kept it under wraps and didn't tell anybody about it until January 20th, which is at least a full month they knew about the coronavirus, and they didn't want anybody to know about it. So we know now that at that time they were aware of a public health crisis that was ongoing in China, and they didn't tell us about it. So it's kind of, I mean, the media tries to block everything out. Oh, well, it didn't come from China. Then why is it that it was spreading rampantly in China, and at that time it wasn't spreading in America? That's just the only question. And I'm very surprised that the media has not reported any of this. This is very just perplexing to me. So next what I have is, and this one is this is about the parliamentarian. And I'm going to give you a little background information. Harris and White House refused to rescue a $15 minimum wage from parliamentarian acts. Washington Examiner piece. I do not have I'm going to try to find. Emily Brooks is the writer of the piece. And just so everyone gets a little bit of an understanding, I've been getting confused by this parliamentarian. I go, who is it multiple people? What it is when you go through a reconciliation of the bill, the reason that the Democrat Party is going forward with reconciliation of this relief bill is because now you are immune to the filibuster. The filibuster rule no longer applies to this bill. The only problem with the reconciliation is there's this person that is appointed, and I have no idea why this is codified myself in law. This doesn't really make much sense to me, because I think having a government bureaucrat do the work is just nonsensical, because we didn't vote for that person, but whatever. So we have this parliamentarian. It's one person that is selected by the Senate majority. This person was selected by the Senate Majority Leader back when Obama was president. I don't remember. It's a woman. I think they might have her name up here. Eventually, it might come through in this piece. But this woman's, cited a certain rule, and it's funny because it's a rule. It's the Byrd rule. And I'll explain that when we get to it. But they cite the rule saying you can't add $15 minimum wage to the bill because that's going to have some sort of unknown consequence or unknown budgetary restriction. But at the same time, it's also not related to what we're doing. So she saw it as moot. So she pretty much just threw it away. And in this piece here, they actually make the argument that Kamala Harris could have overrode it, and she chose not to override it. So the piece starts off, left-wing activists are not happy that Vice President Kamala Harris and the White House do not plan to overrule the Senate parliamentarian to keep a $15 per hour minimum wage hike provision in the coronavirus relief bill. Democrats, which hold a slim 50 seat plus Harris majority in the chamber, are moving to pass their $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill through the budget reconciliation process, which circumvents the chance of the Republican filibuster and the need for a 60-vote supermajority. But the Senate's Byrd rule limits what kind of provisions can be part of a bill moving through budget reconciliation, preventing measures extraneous to the budget from consideration. So extraneous, I guess, meaning it has nothing to do with the budget, which there's a lot of stuff in that bill that has absolutely nothing. It's irrelevant, but there's a lot of stuff in that bill that are completely irrelevant and aren't related to the people themselves and the relief that people actually need. More importantly, the Byrd rule. For you folks that don't know what the Byrd rule is named after, it's named after Robert Byrd, who put forward the piece of legislation, and that is the former Klan member, and he was in the Senate, I think, up until 2004, obviously a Democrat, because the Democrat Party was deeply affiliated, and they're the founders of the Ku Klux Klan. And here's a picture of him with Joe Biden, speaking of that, because Joe Biden used to campaign with him. And let's see if I can find the picture. There it is up there on your screen for you. That's Robert Byrd. So I guess that ended up coming to bite Joe Biden in the butt at the end of the day. That loving of the Ku Klux Klan member. I'm just gonna take a picture of that so you guys can see it. So the piece goes on. Let me find it here. The Senate parliamentarian on Thursday advised that the $15 minimum wage hike in the coronavirus relief bill would violate the Byrd rule, essentially blocking Democrats and the Biden administration from keeping the wage hike as part of the bill. Some Democrats, though, brought up a way around that. Have Harris, with her technical constitutional power as the president of the Senate, overrule the Senate parliamentarian and keep the $15 minimum wage provision in the bill. Make a long story short, I'm not exactly sure. I guess that's something that they could try. They're not going to try it. It's been found. AOC's not happy. The far left's not happy. Some of the more moderate Democrats, such as a Joe Manchin of West Virginia, say that they weren't going to pass it through. I don't know what's going to end up happening with this bill. This relief bill, I have a very good feeling that the Republicans might actually take a stand on this, because they're not going to push through something that has extraneous spending to begin with, this irrelevant spending. If 9% of the bill goes to the people, then obviously it's not a good bill. It's a $1.9 trillion spending bill, and only 9% of it's going to be seen by us. The rest goes to state, local governments, just a bunch of garbage in the bill to begin with. It is disappointing. But here what I have is AOC calling for a $24 minimum wage. It's a Breitbart piece. I was going to show you a clip of her, but it's just not even worth it. I don't even like giving her the clicks because it's just such a waste of time to even talk about it. But she was, the statement that they make is the $24 minimum wage, because the way that inflation's been going, people deserve $24. But then at the same time, yes, inflation has gotten bad, but to make things and make items and commodities have become much cheaper because of the free market. And I do agree that the inflation's bad, but the inflation being bad has nothing, it's not going to be helped by more and more spending from the government and making an inflation of the currency and inflation of the prices. Everything is relative. Once you decide to raise the minimum wage to $24 an hour, to begin with, the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, was finding that 1.4 million people were going to be laid off to begin with. By doing this, it would actually lay more people off than it would bring people out of poverty, by their estimation. From doing that, it will raise the price of everything. Once you raise minimum wage to 15, not only 50, I mean 24 is absolutely insane. But then they make the moral argument where no one's worth is this much an hour. Okay, then if you guys like the idea of $15 an hour as the minimum wage and you think that, you know, people are worth more than that, then what stops you from making it 20, 25, 30? Why don't we just pay people $100 an hour as a minimum wage? That's the real question. So you're putting people's worth yourself as a Democrat. You're putting people's worth at $15 an hour for minimum wage? Why are you going to put their worth there? Why are you going to stop it there? Why not go to 20? Why not go to 30? Why not go to 100? Why are people not getting paid $100 an hour? Because everything is relative, folks. It's not, you cannot pay someone, you can't artificially throw a wrench into the economy and then expect prices not to rise and skyrocket and cause more inflation. You're going to make everyone get paid $15 an hour to do jobs that aren't worth that. When you are employed, when you're an employer, when you go to hire employees or you're an employee, you have to think, what is the value that I am adding to this job? What am I adding to this company by me being here? If your value added at the end of the day is not as much as you're getting paid, through that, if your value added per hour to the company is $10, but you're making $15 an hour, you're going to get fired. You're going to get laid off. Your job will be automated, or the business will have to lay you off. They'll have to give you less hours. It's just not going to work. That's why you should let the free market decide how things should go. So another piece on this, a National Review piece by Brad Palumbo, why a $15 minimum wage would hit parents the hardest. So, he mentions to start off that Congressional Budget Office story that I had, or that study they came through with, finding that 1.4 million people will be laid off. And then he goes on, and I quote, "Even if there were no attendant negative employment effects, there would still be a strong case against the wage hikes. There is no such thing as a free lunch after all. Often overlooked in this debate is that almost all of the costs of higher mandated wages are passed on to consumers, thus decreasing their purchasing power. This sort of pass-through hits the working class the hardest and in effect completely undermines the policy's purported goal." And that's the reasoning. So when you want to increase, like I said before, you want to increase the wage artificially of somebody that stocks shelves in Walmart or in ShopRite. Once you do that, now the price of milk goes up. The price of everything that's in that store is going to have to go up to make up for that minimum wage hike. So he goes on. For example, research shows that McDonald's often responds to increases in the minimum wage not by slashing jobs. It's more often small businesses that have to do that, but by passing on nearly all of the costs to consumers via price increases. But this phenomenon isn't limited to industries such as fast food. Indeed, a new study reveals that a $15 minimum wage would cause similar price increases in a crucial expense for many working families, childcare. And this is a very interesting element that I never even thought of, is the childcare. So he goes on, "Finding affordable childcare is already a struggle for millions of Americans. It's a consistent problem that sucks up huge chunks of limited household budgets and sometimes limits the ability of parents to work. According to Childcare Aware of America, childcare costs an average of $9,100 to $9,600 per year nationwide, albeit with significant variations across different states and ages. Many families spend from 10 to 30% of their income on childcare alone." This is a very interesting way he ends up going into this. But on the point, just to hit on the point that he stated before about small businesses, yes, small businesses will end up slashing jobs because it'll be harder for them to survive, and then the cost goes on to the consumers for the big businesses such as McDonald's, which actually I noticed this myself when I live in New Jersey. When they had a hike of the minimum wage, I noticed that certain sandwiches on the menu, certain double quarter pounder was a full $1 extra. You start noticing that, and then they go on to also automate jobs where you walk in and no one even takes your order anymore. You do it on a screen. So on the child care debate, he's going to go on. Child care is already difficult to afford, but would become much more so if the fight for $15 were successful, according to the Heritage Foundation Rachel Gressler. In a new study, Gressler concludes that because childcare is a labor-intensive industry in which the hourly median wage is only $11.65, a $15 federal minimum wage will impose a massive increase in labor costs on child care providers. The nature of this business means that employers are unable to do much about the size of their workforce in response to increased labor costs. Instead, providers will respond with massive price hikes. Childcare costs would increase by an average of 21%, which would be an extra $3,700 per year for 2 children, and up to 43% or more than $6,000 a year in some states, Gressler reports. She continues, the impacts would be greatest in low-cost areas. In Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Mississippi, costs would surge between 37% and 43%. In all 10 states would see at least a 30% increase in childcare costs. Folks, this is gonna be such a substantial, because then you also have to think about this as well. I don't know how this works, but any employee in a town, any town employee job is going to be also $15 an hour. So this is going to also increase your taxes. You're going to have to pay more taxes because of this. And then you're also going to actually have to pay more taxes on local sales tax and state sales tax as well, just because there's going to be, when you increase the minimum wage, you inflate the prices of everything that you're shopping for. And then since that price is higher, you're going to pay more in taxes on the sales tax. I mean, it's just, you should just let the market work itself. And especially when you go into Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mississippi, these are all low-cost areas to live. It's not expensive to live there for a reason, because the pay's lower. They've almost eliminated, or they have a lot less of a inflation rate in those specific states. In terms of usually red states, generally, the inflation rates aren't as substantial as they are in all the blue states. Thus, the reasoning for people that live in New York, they make so much money, is because their rent or their mortgage or their taxes are so high. So everything is relative at the end of the day. So here's a chart, or rather, it's just a visual. The entire country, $15 minimum wage would increase childcare costs 21%. I guess that's on average, 21% on average. And then it shows the specific different states. And as you can see, the southern states are going to be most affected by this minimum wage hike, because a lot of the blue states already don't have, or their minimum wage is already pretty high to begin with in a lot of these blue states. But mostly it's all red states in the South. If you look at the from Oklahoma to South Carolina, straight across the board, it's all more than 30% increases in their, and Texas also, I think, had, or is it Florida, had a minimum wage hike, I think, in their last election. So it's not as bad for them, but it's still pretty bad. So next, what I have is a recent study finds that conservatives treat others more equally than liberals. And this is tremendous. And I have some examples of this as well. I mean, in a general sense, it's obvious. Hillary Clinton showed up to the Charlemagne show, the Breakfast Club, with hot sauce in her purse. Suddenly now has this weird Southern twang going on. If you take videos of Hillary Clinton talking to a white audience, she talks very proper, and then when she goes to a black audience, you see her starting to talk with a little bit of a twang, a Southern twang. Joe Biden does the same thing, I've noticed. So this is not something that's unusual. So this piece, it's written on Psychology Today, written by Corey Clark, is the woman's name, the writer's name. So it starts off, recent experiments reveal that in some cases it is liberals who tend to treat information and people more unequally on the basis of sex, race, and group status. In a set of studies, liberals wished to censor written passages that portrayed low-status groups unfavorably more than identical passages that portrayed high-status groups unfavorably, whereas conservatives treated the passages more comparably. So just to try to clear some of that up. If you take a statement and you replace one ethnicity, a racist, something that you view as racist or not racist. Let's say it's some sort of a derogatory statement about white people. If you take the white person part out and you put the black person part out, put black in there, and it turns out to be now a racist statement. So essentially, this is what the study's about. So you had the same exact statement both ways, but one had white, one had black. Liberals saw the black one as offensive, but they did not see the white one as offensive. That's essentially what she's saying here. So on personality measures, liberals are more egalitarian than conservatives. This preference for equality is often measured with the social dominance orientation scale, which contains items about both equality of treatment. I.e., for example, we would have fewer problems if we treated people more equally, and equality of outcomes. I.e., for example, we should strive to make incomes as equal as possible. So, phrases, who knows? But, okay, so to continue here. Recent experiments and quasi-experiments of this kind suggest that at least sometimes it is liberals who tend to treat information and people more unequally on the basis of sex, race, and group status, evaluations that favor or disfavor some groups. For example, 2 sets of studies by 2 different research teams found that participants evaluated science on sex differences more favorably when women were portrayed more favorably than men, as better drawers, and less prone to lying, and as more intelligent. So liberals saw women as better, more artistic, I guess, less prone to lying, and more intelligent than men were, and were portrayed more favorably than women. In both of these sets of studies, these tendencies were stronger as participants were more politically liberal. So liberal bias was that women are pretty much, they don't lie as much as men. Women are more artistic than men. They're more intelligent than men. Similarly, in a more naturalistic study on Twitter, liberals were more likely to amplify the success of female and black athletes than male and white athletes, whereas conservatives treated the successes of groups more similarly. In another set of studies, white liberals presented less self-competence to black than white interaction partners, whereas white conservatives treated black and white interaction partners more similarly. And in another, and just let me explain that. So, if you're a liberal, when you go up to a black person or a white person, you guys are talking about this or the other, whatever you guys are talking about. Let's say you invest money. Let's say you invest stocks. If you walk up to a black person as a liberal, you will make it like you don't know what you're doing and you're less competent at the skill of investing stocks and whether you make sure and smart investments. If you walk up to a white person, you're going to be a little bit more braggadocious and egotistical in your approach to state how good you are in investing stocks. That's just an example. So that's what they found through the study, is that if the liberal walked up to the black person, they were making themselves out to be, I guess, dumber or less effective rather than when they walked up to a white person. Now, in another set, liberals had stronger desires to censor pages that portrayed low-status groups unfavorably than identical passages that portrayed high-status groups unfavorably, whereas conservatives treated the passages more comparably. So I guess a low status group in this instance would be whether you were a lower income, whether you're a minority or you weren't. In their view, they would say that there should be much more censors on anything that is unfavorable towards a low status group than if it was a high status group. So essentially, you got liberals just treating people differently depending on their socioeconomic status or their economic status. So it goes on. Other teams of researchers have found similar patterns in other domains. For example, people had more generous acceptance criteria for admitting black than white candidates to an honor society, and this tendency was stronger among liberals. So liberals were accepting more. They had different standards, and they had different standards for blacks than they did whites. Their acceptance criteria was much lower for blacks than it was for whites. The standard was lower, which we call in the conservative movement, we call that the soft bigotry of low expectations. They expect nothing of these minority groups. So whereas those high in social dominance orientation favored a white over a black job applicant, the reverse tendency to favor a black over a white job applicant was stronger among those low in social dominance orientation. And whereas those high in system justification correlated with more conservative ideology found jokes that target low status and high status groups similarly funny. Those low on system justification liberals found jokes that targeted low status groups less funny than those that target high status groups. So, this end of the day, this finds people that are liberals to be hypocritical. They treat different. They act like they don't treat everyone differently, but really what they do is they treat people differently. Which doesn't, once again, this doesn't surprise me. This has been done by, this is something that politicians do. And I don't know if they do it intentionally or not. I just don't know at this point if they're taught to be this way socially. But here's a clip of Joe Biden talking about minority communities signing up to get the coronavirus vaccine. Play 7.
The other portion is a lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody in the community, in the Hispanic and the African American community, particularly in rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to get online to determine how to get in line for that COVID vaccination.
So this was a clip from the town hall that Biden had a couple weeks ago. It was about a week or two ago, talking about COVID vaccinations. The reason that people don't want to get vaccinated to begin with is not because they're too stupid to sign up. It's because people have distrust in the system, because when Trump was the president, you and Kamala Harris were walking around saying not to trust the vaccine because, Trump, as if Trump was in the lab with his lab coat on making the vaccine himself. So that's why people, don't trust it. Minority communities, maybe they just don't feel like getting it. Maybe they feel healthy. They don't need to go get it. But for him too, he specifically points them out and says pretty much they don't know how to use the internet and they don't know how to go online. Which is funny because Joe Biden probably has absolutely no idea how to use the internet himself. I'm sure that whoever tweets for him, it's his handlers. It's not him tweeting. He doesn't know what's going on. He's totally unaware of reality right now. So to go off of that, to go off of the intersectionality, the Squad's bill to restore voting rights to incarcerated individuals fails in the House. The Squad is in, now Cori Bush is part of them. Cori Bush is a representative coming out of St. Louis, Missouri. You have Rashida Tlaib as well as, what's her name, the other one? Ilhan Omar, AOC, and there's one more, Ayanna Pressley. All of them, they put together this bill to restore the voting rights of incarcerated individuals, and this was failed in the House. You had 97 Democrats voted in favor, and 209 Republicans were against it, and 119 Democrats also were against it. So she goes on, Cori Bush, she goes on Twitter, and this is her tweet up here on the screen. She states, "For the first time ever, the House took a vote on whether or not to end the cruelty of denying incarcerated people their right to vote. Our amendment didn't pass, but 97 Democrats voted with us. We will not stop fighting until we dismantle white supremacy in all of its forms." So I just don't know. To begin with, there's a lot of incarcerated individuals that are in prison right now that are legitimate white supremacists. They were part of a white supremacist, whether neo-Nazis, they were part of some sort of a white supremacist organization. So you restoring white supremacists' voting rights that are in prison and are sucking on the government teat, when you are in prison, you are being paid for by the people. We are paying taxes for you to be held in those facilities. These public prisons. I don't even think they have private anymore. So I don't think that people that are in prison that we're paying for should be able to have the clout to vote on how we spend our tax money, because they're not paying into the system. They are a net loss on our society right now. When you're in prison, you are a net loss in terms of budget every single year because we are paying for you to be there. Now, do I think that people that after they commit a felony and once they're done, they've served their time and they're out, whether they can vote or not? Now, that's a totally different discussion. Now, me personally, I am very sympathetic to the view that once you already serve your time in prison, that should be it. You shouldn't have to continue to be treated, because the criminal justice system in the United States is supposed to be for what's the word? it's not retribution, but sometimes it's treated like it's retribution, or it's not supposed to be punitive. It's supposed to be for rehabilitation. So the whole idea of rehabilitation, wouldn't you think that people, once they're out, they've served their time, they did the time for whatever the crime is that they committed, shouldn't they be able to vote again? And I'm not talking about, rapists, pedophiles, all that. I'm not talking about any of those, because I think those people should either be in prison for life or they should be put to the death penalty. I'm talking about people that get caught on, whether it's possession or something of that nature, something that you're in prison for a shorter period of time. I guess it would have to be some sort of a comprehensive plan. We'd have to sit there and we'd have to look, all right, which crime do they commit? Yes. Or which crime do they commit? No, they shouldn't get their voting rights back. But the answer definitely is not everybody that's in prison should vote. The only reason they're pushing for this, same thing with illegal immigration, the only reason they push for these things is because they know they can get more votes. I just don't know how people being in prison and not being able to vote is somehow a product or a form of white supremacy. So next what I have is just real quick to play off that. So we have that situation going on. And then Trump over the weekend over at CPAC.
Well, thank you very much. And hello, CPAC. Do you miss me yet? Do you miss me? Joe Biden has had the most disastrous first month of any president in modern history. That's true. Already the Biden administration has proven that they are anti-jobs, anti-family, anti-borders, anti-energy, anti-women, and anti-science. In just one short month, we have gone from America first to America last.
So he starts off pretty good stuff, ripping Biden apart, saying what they've done so far in the administration over the last 2 months about. And, or I guess a month and a half. And the next he goes on to name some of the Republicans, and then at the very end he names Liz Cheney, the warmonger, and just see the applause he gets. And then the biggest statement of the night that pissed the Democrats off the most, that pissed the liberals off the most, that want to now sanction or to suppress what was said, is this very last statement that he says. Check it out.
And of course, the warmonger, a person that loves seeing our troops fighting, Liz Cheney. How about that? Stronger than ever before. I am not starting a new party. Who knows? I may even decide to beat them for a third time. Okay?
So the coverage from the left-wing media, or just the media, as well as a lot of the left-wing politicians, are Trump is inciting violence by saying that he won the last election and his conspiracy lies and all this. They were all pissed off. But just interestingly note that it talks about Liz Cheney, the applause that he gets, and now all of the other politicians are kind of stepping back, especially the establishment. They're noticing that Trump still holds the power in the party, and these people are so maniacal and egotistical, these politicians, that they don't understand. They actually thought that they could throw Trump out of the party and all the people that voted for him would just choose them now. Like Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, they thought that if Trump was no longer in politics and you didn't see him, there would be no loyalty and allegiance to Trump, and people in turn would turn to Mitt Romney, and their loyalty would go to either Mitt Romney or a Liz Cheney-like individual. That's how egotistical, egomaniacs these people are. They're so narcissistic that they don't actually understand that there's somebody bigger than them out there. And it's funny, and that's why the establishment doesn't like him, is part of the reason is because he stole their thunder. He walked right into the dome, and he just stole their thunder, and they don't know what to do about it, because they do their thing where they hold their hand like Bill Clinton, and they talk in these weird virtues and in almost like a systematic approach to the way in which they pronounce things. If you noticed, when Barack Obama talks, he slowly talks and then he speeds up at the very end. He starts very slowly and then he speeds off at the very end of the sentence. That's just the way they go. So off of this, after Trump's speech that he gave, Jen Psaki got a little question about the illegal immigration situation with the Biden administration, asking, what do you think about what Trump had to say? Play 9.
He said President Joe Biden sold out America's children to the teachers union. How does the White House respond to that?
I think we're going to spend more of our time focused on communicating about our agenda for the American people than responding to criticism from the former president.
Folks, they cannot resist. The media can't even resist talking about Trump. The guy isn't on Twitter anymore. They kicked him off Facebook. They kicked him off every single platform. He goes out, he gives a 2-hour-long speech, just bangs it out. Joe Biden can't give a speech at all as yet to address the nation. And he's the president. And then Trump goes out and gives 2-hour speech wrecking the current administration. And the media can't stop talking about him. The new administration can't stop talking about him. It's just unbelievable. It really is. It's laughable at this point. And notice the from, once again, Jen Psaki. She does a terrible job. I don't know if it's that she's nervous, especially when they bring up Trump's name. She's always nervous to respond back, and she uses She would almost be better off taking a brief pause in the middle of speaking instead of saying or because that buffer, just for you folks at home to understand, if you ever go to some sort of an interview, that buffer saying or means that you're nervous and you feel like you are worried about what people think. You have some sort of a self-esteem problem when you're going to answer the question. You're nervous and you don't feel comfortable in answering this question, and that's why you're saying and you feel like you need to add to that space that's a void. When I try myself in speaking, I try to eliminate that myself, but sometimes I will fall into the same nature as well, because it's normal, but you're almost better off just taking a brief pause and recollecting your thoughts rather than filling the sentence with because it just does not sound good. People turn and look at each other and they say, this is what my father would say because he's an a-hole. He'll say this, he'll look at me, he'll go, "You can count the ums." That's what he'll say, because he's just an a-hole. So what I got next is the Andrew Cuomo debacle. This is a New York Post article, and it's a response from, to begin with, we've had about 3 different women come forward saying that either Cuomo was a little too handsy with them, or he was making sexually provocative jokes or gestures towards them. And the last woman said that he walked up to her and asked her if he could give her a kiss, and I don't know, she does not look, I mean, I have a picture I don't want to show you yet, but she does not look like she wants to receive a kiss from Andrew Cuomo. But first I want to just play you Mayor de Blasio's response on the Cuomo situation. Play 3.
They need to say I did something wrong and decide what action they're going to take as a result. But it's even more horrible if it's something like sexual harassment or taking advantage of high office and intimidating a young woman. To laugh it off is even more troubling. It's not a laughing matter. So, people who've done something wrong need to admit it and then talk about what needs to change. And I certainly didn't hear that.
So, friends, it's no surprise that de Blasio is going after Cuomo. They don't really like each other, so no one's surprised here. The more interesting thing about this story is there were all those deaths from COVID-19 because of the nursing home policy from Cuomo, and from the media that has been completely it was not covered. They've negligently handled that story, and this is the one that gets all of the coverage, and this is the important one. This one may be a career ender in politics for Cuomo. The fact that Cuomo is still staying in his position, he's making apologies, saying things like, I don't remember exactly what he said. He said, I never did anything that I regretted in my entire career. I never made weird gestures. He's saying things of that nature. Just pretty much trying to say, maybe I may have done some things that were kind of dicey, but I never did it with an ill intent towards. Those are the kind of statements he's making thus far. And the fact that he has not yet stepped down, to me, means that he's going to go again for the governorship. I think he may actually run again, and he may try to hold on to his position, even though there's a lot of members that want him out. of the governor's seat, especially after a full investigation is done. I don't know whether it's going to be Letitia James or the federal government is going to do their own independent investigation of his behavior. But once one woman comes out, you start to notice more and more come out, and then they look like legitimate accusations, especially when they have him on video talking to women about eating hot dogs. That one was kind of weird. I don't really know how sexual that one was myself. I was just watching it. I thought he was kind of just trying to be like goofy and funny, but it's weird coming from a 63-year-old man talking to a girl that's in her 20s. So here, this is the headline of the New York Post. This visual up on the screen for you listening. It is Andrew Cuomo, and he is grabbing this. If I had to guess, she's probably in her mid to maybe upper 20s or just in her 20s. She's definitely not in her 30s. And this is when he said, "Oh, can I kiss you?" And I don't know if I think he kissed her on the cheek. He ends up kissing her on the cheek, but it's creepy. He's got his hands behind her ears. He's grabbing her face. It's very, very visual. And then he ends up kissing her after this, and this is the third person that's come out from the Cuomo accusations. And then, Cuomo's brother came on, Chris Cuomo, and he made a statement on CNN about, I know about the situation, I'm not covering it because it's my brother, which I don't really blame him, because if it was my brother, I wouldn't want to be covering it either. But he states it like, I shouldn't be covering anything having to do with my brother, but you were covering, during the COVID-19 crisis, you were covering your brother like every other day. With no problem. You actually had him on as a guest on your show. So next what I have is a federal judge, and this is a good story here. Federal judge approved $650 million settlement in massive Facebook privacy case. This is a newsbusters.org article. Is written by Kayla Sargent. This is important here. And this has to do with payouts due to an infringement of civil liberties on Facebook. The settlement included a payout of at least $345 per claimant, according to the approval. The final approval stated that payment should be distributed as expeditiously as possible. The 6.9 million Facebook users who live in Illinois will be eligible to receive $345 as long as they lived in Illinois for at least 6 months during the class period between 2011 and 2020. So pretty much everyone that lives in Illinois is going to get $345 thanks to Facebook. If you're a Facebook user. The Verge noted that in 2019, Facebook made facial recognition on the platform opt-in only. The case began in 2015 after plaintiff Carlo Licata filed suit against Facebook alleging the social media giant's use of facial tagging features without consent was not allowed under Illinois privacy law, according to the Chicago Tribune. The case was moved to Chicago federal court and then California federal court, where it attained class action status. Although Facebook settled in this case, its legal troubles are far from over. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, along with a coalition of 48 states and territories, have both filed separate antitrust lawsuits against Facebook. The House Communications and Technology Subcommittee and the Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee announced on March 25th, a March 25th hearing on misinformation and disinformation plaguing online platforms. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, and Google CEO Sundar Pichai will testify at the upcoming hearing. So this is interesting. This whole thing, the very end, is probably the most important, but they're violating law in Illinois. And then there's also things going on in other countries too where they're getting sued. Facebook's getting sued big time, which is good. This is what we need to do to Facebook to get them to stop infringing on civil and First Amendment liberties. What's important is this March 25th hearing and the guise of calling it on misinformation, disinformation, plaguing online platforms. That really shouldn't be the point. They should be meeting with them on First Amendment issues, and that's really what I hope they get pressed for by at least the Republican Party. The Democrat Party obviously won't be doing that. The Democrat Party is going to sit there and they're going to ask the CEOs of Twitter, Facebook, and Google to considerably increase the amount of shutdowns that they're doing to the conservatives. That's what will happen on this hearing. I'm sure when it comes up, we are going to get to cover them pretty much asking tongue-in-cheek, out in the open, hey, you guys going to shut down conservatives more? Are you guys going to shut down more political content from the conservative party? Or what's going on with that? That's what's going to end up happening on this. But I'm hoping that the Republican Party fights hard, especially a guy like Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, a couple of them try to roast him. So to end here, right before my grand other short news stories, Nevada voter records changed in violation of state policy after Steven Crowder uncovered bogus voter records. This is a Gateway Pundit piece. So Steven Crowder recently on his show, he came out and what he did is he backlogged, and I want to say, where was it, Nevada? It was in Nevada. Yes, Nevada. Okay, so what he was doing is he was looking at the voter rolls that were provided by the Nevada state government, looking at the names, looking at the addresses, and then he would backlog that and go on to UPS, as in the United Parcel Service, the people that deliver your packages. He would go on their site and he would look up the names or he would look up the addresses. He would notice there is no deliverable address on UPS. So he and his team, he employs, I think something, I want to say maybe 70 employees, I think he was stating the other day. I mean, he employs a lot of people. Let's just say a lot of people. So he has these investigative journalists looking into this. He finds, okay, so there's this many names, there's this many addresses. Let's go on the UPS. The algorithm from UPS is saying these aren't deliverable, these aren't real addresses. So he was saying, okay, can we submit this into court? His own lawyer says, no, you can't. You have to literally go there and prove that these addresses aren't real. So what he did was his team, he sent them out there, every individual address. Some of these people that work for him actually lived in Nevada, so they were kind of familiar with the area. They drove to these different addresses, and then they took video of each and every address that was undeliverable, and there's nothing there. It'll be the backs of houses. It's just not real addresses that are being put down. So this article is written by Joe Hoft. So then the story continues after they come out with this video, the Louder with Crowder team. And it goes on. This week, Crowder and his team reported that the invalid voters identified in Nevada were updated last Tuesday night. What was unusual about this was that the voter roll is to be updated on Mondays per the state's policies. It appears this activity was in response to Crowder's reporting last week. It's clear that the voter apparatus in Nevada is broken and corrupt. During the 2020 election, those in charge of the elections allowed vote counting to go on without Republicans present. Those counting prevented Republicans from even entering the counting area. This was illegal, but no one was ever charged, and the mainstream media never reported on it. It reads. So there was a lot of issues in Nevada. There was issues in Arizona. There was issues Georgia. They weren't allowing people to count the votes either, or they weren't allowing Republicans to watch the votes be counted. So in this specific case, what happened was Crowder came out with this video. The next day, they notice, oh, look at this. They're updating the information. They're changing the addresses of these people that we already checked the addresses and they were no good. They were undeliverable. And then they found a name of an individual that worked for Hillary Clinton. And if you watch this, if you go to the article that I have, they have the full video of Crowder. It's maybe the first 20 minutes of his show. They go through it. But this was a Clinton staffer that they can't find, because they think they're no longer alive, whether they're dead or whatever. They're not alive anymore. This is her name. This is the person. Voted, obviously, for Joe Biden. They changed the address. So they changed the original address that was a vacant lot to something else. So then what Crowder does is he hires his people. They go back out there, and they go check this address. It's not a real address. So this, and according to the state's policies, this voter roll is only updated on Mondays. So this voter roll was updated on a Tuesday night in violation of state law. They violated the policy. So somebody must have got wind of this. And there's an operation behind all this. And I'm so surprised. And once again, I mean, the whole video that he has is like something like 20 minutes long. Maybe he explains it. It's hard for me to play the media just because there's so much video that I can't really play all of it myself. So I just ask you, I highly suggest you, and if anyone wants to talk to you about there's no voter fraud or voter irregularities, Steven Crowder has said many times that he's willing to go under the violation or the punishment of perjury and state this on the record that these are fake addresses, and who knows about these names, whether they're fake or not. And then we have all these recently, especially HR1 is going to be voted on. They're talking about this. It's called something like Save America. HR1 is just for one-party rule. And this is what they're going to implement these policies everywhere. Everything that went on in Nevada, everything that went on in Georgia, they're going to just implement these policies countrywide from the federal government head, directly in violation of the Constitution, might I add. So I just don't know at this point. The liberalism is pretty pervasive. It's been spreading at astronomical rates. I just listened to a Bongino piece today, a Dan Bongino podcast myself. And I'm going to take the article that he's talking about, but there's a lot of authoritarian spying, things of that nature going on, and it seems like it's being exacerbated. It's being moved. The envelope's being pushed way faster and way more rapidly than we ever thought it would, whether it's private industry doing it or it's the government trying to push it down our throats. So to get to these 5 headlines here, or what is it? Yeah, it's 5. So, potential Biden NASA pick invested in Chinese telecom giant blacklisted by Pentagon. So, there's a free beacon piece written by, I don't have the author, but it is, the name of the gentleman is Bill Nelson. He was a former NASA astronaut, and he has been very, very soft on China. He has big-time investments in China, apparently. That's a story worth listening to. He was also in favor of having some sort of conference with China and going up there co-equally, having some sort of a coalition in space with China on the same aircraft or the same craft, the same spaceship, I guess you would call it. U.S. Soccer Federation repeals rule mandating players to stand for the national anthem. That's a Bongino piece. They're soft on that. Not like anybody watched the Women's Soccer League anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I don't know if that's women's. From what I've seen, it's the Women's Soccer League. It may actually be the Men's Soccer League, too. I don't know, but no one watches soccer in America anyway, so no one really cares about that. So next is White House advisor Cedric Richmond says the administration wants free tuition as reparations to HBCs. HBCs being historic black colleges. So what they want now, and this is the White House, I think he's a senior advisor to the Biden administration. His name's Cedric Richmond, and he wants free college tuition at historically black colleges. Now, Trump has given the most ever in the history to historic black colleges and universities when he was the president, in funding, and now they want it as reparations, folks. So now what we're going to get is we're going to get a dissemination of everyone else's money, where you're going for, the government is going to compel you, take your money from you. This is why I don't blame anybody for dodging taxes. I never have. I don't think I ever will actually blame anybody for dodging taxes, because this is what the government does with your money. The government is solely now there to take your money from you and give it to somebody else. It is redistributionism. There's nothing free. There's no free principle about that happening. There's no free country. No one. That's not a free system. That's not a free, fair society when you have the government coming in, compelling you at the end of a gun to take your money from you and then hand it to somebody else for social justice. Something that happened. If these reparations are for slavery, slavery happened in this country. It was eradicated in 1865. So what? More than 150 years ago, and now you want reparations for that. And there's a lot of people that weren't even in this. Their family, like for example, my family wasn't even in the country at that time. My family came to the country in the early 1900s. So next I have is ICE locks Twitter account that alerted public of illegal immigrants freed by sanctuary cities. This is a crazy story. The Washington Times piece. ICE themselves, Immigration Customs Enforcement, they locked their Twitter account that would be used to alert people of illegal immigrants that were freed by sanctuary cities. So if you had illegal immigrants running around, if they were criminals or of that nature, they would go and they would post, hey, this person, this is what they look like, this is their name. If you see them, let us know. They locked that account. They're no longer operational, so I guess they're not going after illegal aliens anymore in this country. The Boston, and that would go off the story that I had last show where they were talking about actually getting rid of ICE and then taking those officers and moving them to different organizations within the federal government instead and have them do other work unrelated to customs and immigration enforcement. So very last one here, I have a small excerpt from the piece. Boston schools suspend advanced classes because they're too white and too Asian. This is a Bongino.com piece. It comes directly, I think, from the Washington Times as well. And the excerpt reads, the Boston public schools have a population that's 80% black and Hispanic, but the advanced classes are 70% white and Asian. Despite that, the process certainly doesn't seem to be unfair to minorities other than Asians. The program was open to all students in Boston public schools that had a high score on a test called the Terra Nova. The students that did well were placed in a lottery and selected from there. Last year, 453 students qualified, 143 applied, and 116 were enrolled. This isn't out of character for the district. Back in 2017, Boston Public Schools changed the world map they use because they were offensive, or rather racist. Now, this piece has a video from Tucker Carlson a couple years back. The Boston Public Schools got rid of or changed the characteristics of the world map because the characteristics of the world map made Europe a little bit bigger. So they changed it around so Europe was smaller and Africa was bigger for social justice reasons. And I'm not making that up. That's a legitimate story, and it's in the piece if you want to check it out. It's unbelievable. It'll be the very last one in the show notes, very last link. So, yeah, 453 students were qualified to be in this lottery. 143 of them only applied. So you had people that were qualified for this that didn't apply to it. I don't know what their demographic was in particular, but now it's, okay, so we think this institution, this meritocracy, and this is communism, by the way. We don't like the idea of the merit-based system, so we're going to get rid of the merit-based system. So now everybody has to be in regular classes, and because you worked really hard, you get nothing in return, and you don't get rewarded. I've never been really a big fan of the whole gifted and talented thing, but the answer, the response is, oh, we're going to get rid of them because of racism? And 70% of them are white and Asian. What about the 30% then that are black or of minority groups, and they don't count Asians as minorities anymore? It's just like, it's exhausting. The social justice stuff just gets exhausting after a while. They're getting rid of these advanced classes, and you know what? These aren't even really technically gifted and talented. These are just advanced classes to better prepare for college or for other school activities, whether it's college or high school. It's taking away the merit. They want everyone to be on the same level. They want everybody to have the equality of outcome rather than the equality of opportunity. Everybody had the opportunity to get into those classes. There was 450. Not everybody, but based on if you did well enough, you had the opportunity to get into those classes. You were qualified. And instead of having that system, they have the system where there's an equality of outcome. Everybody has to go and sit in the regular classroom. Even if you're advanced and you're doing very well, you don't get rewarded for your hard work or your good behavior. So that'll end this one. I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe, let people know about the podcast. Like I said, I do not advertise. So drop the mic is in my name on people. Let them know about the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. And I will see you all on Friday. Thank you.